In a quiet suburb of Arlington, Virginia, a 10-year-old boy named Ryan sat at the dinner table on a November evening in 2019, staring at his history textbook. His mother, Catherine, noticed his hands trembling as he traced his finger over a photograph of Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. Ryan looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "I was there. I remember everything. The sun was so bright that day. Too bright." Catherine felt the room tilt slightly. Her son had never shown particular interest in the Kennedy assassination. They had never discussed it in detail at home. Yet the certainty in his voice carried a weight that made her set down the dish she was holding and sit beside him. Ryan began speaking in a rush, describing sensations rather than facts at first. The leather seat, the roses Jackie was holding. They were so red. The smell of them mixed with her perfume. The crowds were so loud, cheering. I kept waving. My hand was tired from waving, but I kept doing it because they seemed so happy to see us. Catherine recorded this initial conversation on her phone, her hands unsteady. Over the following days, Ryan's statements became more detailed and more disturbing. He described the moment of impact with a specificity that made Catherine's stomach turn. He spoke of confusion, of Jackie climbing onto the trunk of the car, of sounds and sensations that matched historical accounts but were delivered with the emotional immediacy of lived experience rather than learned information. Catherine contacted Dr. James Morrison at Georgetown University, a psychologist who had spent 15 years studying cases of apparent past life recall in children. Dr. Morrison arrived at their home 3 weeks later with recording equipment and a structured interview protocol. He believed in approaching such cases with neither automatic skepticism nor uncritical acceptance, but with methodical documentation. Ryan sat across from Dr. Morrison in the family living room, a slight boy with serious eyes that seemed older than his years. Dr. Morrison began with baseline questions, establishing Ryan's knowledge of American history and his exposure to media about President Kennedy. Ryan explained that he had learned basic facts in school, that Kennedy was president, that he was assassinated in Dallas, that it happened in 1963. But when Dr. Morrison asked him to describe what he remembered rather than what he had learned, Ryan's demeanor changed. He closed his eyes and his breathing deepened. The memories feel different than regular memories. They're like watching myself from inside and outside at the same time. I can feel what I was feeling, but I can also see the whole scene like I'm watching it happen. Dr. Morrison asked Ryan to describe the morning of November 22nd, 1963. Ryan's response included details that made the researcher lean forward. "I remember being at the hotel, the Texas Hotel in Fort Worth. We had spoken at a breakfast. My back was hurting. It always hurt. I took the medication, but it never fully helped." Catherine interjected that Ryan had never mentioned the Texas Hotel before, and family computers showed no recent searches for Kennedy assassination details beyond basic facts. Dr. Morrison noted this carefully. The chronic back pain Kennedy suffered was well documented, but would a 10-year-old studying basic history necessarily know this detail or think to mention it? Over the next hour, Ryan described the flight from Fort Worth to Dallas, the descent into Love Field, the arrival sequence. He mentioned details about the weather, about conversations with Jackie, about the pink suit she wore and his opinion of it. "I thought it was too bright for the occasion, but she looked beautiful in it. She always looked beautiful." The emotional tone shifted when he spoke about her. There was a tenderness there that seemed incongruous coming from a child. Dr. Morrison asked about the motorcade route. Ryan described it with remarkable spatial accuracy, mentioning turns and landmarks. He talked about seeing the Texas School Book Depository building, but not registering it as significant. "Why would I? It was just a building among buildings." Catherine had invited Dr. Morrison to interview Ryan multiple times over several months, allowing them to track consistency and gather detailed information. During the third session, Dr. Morrison employed a technique used in past life regression research. He showed Ryan a series of photographs mixed together, some from Dallas in 1963, others from different cities and different times. He asked Ryan to identify which locations felt familiar. Ryan sorted through them slowly, occasionally picking up an image and studying it closely. When he came to an aerial photograph of Dealey Plaza taken in 1962, he held it for a long moment. This is where it happened, but this was taken before. The trees are smaller. There weren't as many people on this lawn yet. Dr. Morrison verified later that the photograph was indeed taken over a year before the assassination, during plaza renovations. This information was not readily available in standard textbooks or popular documentaries. Ryan also identified photographs of the interior of Air Force One, specific rooms in the White House, including the cabinet room and the private family quarters, and a photograph of Hyannisport. When shown an image of the presidential limousine used that day in Dallas, Ryan touched the photograph and his hand drew back as if burned. I don't want to look at that one. The most striking session occurred in February 2020 when Dr. Morrison asked Ryan to describe what he believed really happened during those crucial seconds in Dealey Plaza. Catherine had been hesitant to allow this line of questioning, worried about traumatizing her son, but Ryan himself had expressed a need to talk about it. He said the memories were becoming more insistent, that they woke him at night. Dr. Morrison proceeded carefully, establishing that Ryan could stop at any time and employing grounding techniques used in trauma therapy. Ryan spoke slowly, his eyes unfocused, looking at something beyond the room. We had just turned onto Elm Street. I was waving to people on the right side. I heard something that I thought was a firecracker. Then I felt it. The impact. It was high on my back, near my neck. My hands went up. I remember my hands going up to my throat. I couldn't understand what was happening. Everything became confused. Jackie was screaming. I tried to turn toward her. Then the second impact. The final one. Ryan's voice broke. Everything went white. Not dark like people say. White. Like all the light in the world concentrated in one moment. Then nothing. Then this slow awareness of being somewhere else, someone else. It took years. I was a baby again, but the memories stayed underneath everything. Catherine was crying quietly. Dr. Morrison maintained his professional composure, but his notes from that session, which he later shared with colleagues, indicated his deep unsettlement. The description of two distinct impacts, the upward hand movement to the throat, the sequence of events, all matched the historical record and the Zapruder film, but Ryan was describing them from an internal perspective. More significantly, he was describing sensations and immediate reactions that no historical document could capture because the person experiencing them had died moments later. Dr. Morrison arranged for Ryan to be interviewed by Dr. Elena Vasquez, a historian specializing in the Kennedy assassination who had spent 30 years studying archival materials, witness testimonies, and forensic evidence. Dr. Vasquez approached the meeting with frank skepticism. She had seen many people claim knowledge about the assassination, most seeking attention or suffering from false memory syndrome. She prepared a list of highly specific questions, mixing accurate details with deliberate inaccuracies to test Ryan's responses. Their meeting took place at Catherine's home in March 2020, just before the pandemic lockdowns began. Dr. Vasquez began with seemingly simple questions. She asked Ryan about the morning routine on November 22nd. Ryan described reading newspapers at breakfast, mentioned specific articles about political tensions in Texas. Dr. Vasquez later verified that these articles had indeed appeared in papers Kennedy would have seen that morning. She asked about the Secret Service agents present. Ryan named several correctly, describing their positions and their personalities in ways that matched biographical information about these men. Then Dr. Vasquez set her trap. She asked Ryan about a conversation that supposedly occurred in the limousine just before the shots were fired. She described a fabricated exchange between Kennedy and Governor Connally. Ryan looked confused. That didn't happen. The governor was talking, but it was about the weather, about how beautiful the day was. Jackie said something about how there couldn't be any more complaints about the weather now. We were relieved it wasn't raining. Dr. Vasquez felt something shift in her chest. Ryan's version matched witness testimonies given by Jackie Kennedy and others in the car. The false conversation she had invented, he had rejected. She continued testing. She showed him photographs of people, asking him to identify relationships. When she showed him a photograph of a woman, one of dozens mixed in a stack, Ryan studied it carefully. That's Mary. His voice was quiet. Dr. Vasquez noted the name. Mary Meyer, a close friend of Kennedy's, someone whose relationship with the president was not widely publicized until years after his death, and certainly not standard knowledge for a 10-year-old. She asked how he knew her. Ryan's expression was complicated, containing emotions that seemed far too mature for his face. We were friends. Close friends. It was complicated. I cared about her. The sadness when he said this seemed genuine and deep. Dr. Vasquez spent 4 hours with Ryan that day. By the end, her skepticism had not disappeared entirely, but it had been significantly shaken. She told Dr. Morrison later that either this child had accessed information that was extraordinarily obscure and specific, or something else was occurring that challenged conventional understanding of consciousness and memory. The emotional authenticity of his responses, the consistency of his narrative, and the accuracy of verifiable details created a picture that was difficult to dismiss as simple fantasy or learned information. In the months that followed, Ryan's memories began to include what he called the deeper truth about Dallas. During a session in May 2020, conducted over video call due to pandemic restrictions, Ryan told Dr. Morrison something that made the researcher pause the recording to verify he wanted this documented. Ryan spoke about conspiracy, about forces beyond what the official narrative described. I remember feeling in the days before that something was wrong. The tension in Dallas was worse than we expected. The Secret Service was concerned, but there were pressures to maintain the route, to keep the bubble top off the car. There were people who didn't want me to succeed with certain policies. The Soviet Union, Cuba, the military-industrial complex, elements in organized crime. I had made powerful enemies. I knew it. Jackie knew it. But you can't govern from a place of fear. Ryan described a president who understood he was vulnerable but felt trapped by political necessity and personal courage. He talked about decisions made regarding Vietnam, about confrontations with military advisors who wanted escalation, about attempts to negotiate with the Soviet Union that were seen as weakness by some in the intelligence community. Whether these memories represented historical truth, constructed narrative, or something else entirely remained uncertain. But they reflected a sophisticated understanding of the political tensions of 1963 that seemed remarkable for a child. The question of what happened in Dallas according to Ryan's memories became more specific in July 2020. Dr. Morrison asked directly whether Ryan believed Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Ryan's response was measured. Oswald was there. He fired shots, but I don't believe he acted alone. I remember fragments, not clear memories, but impressions of converging interests, of people who wanted change and saw violence as necessary. I don't have names that aren't already part of the theories. I don't have evidence that historians don't have. But the feeling, the certainty that more people were involved, that the truth was deliberately obscured, that feeling is strong. Dr. Morrison pressed for specifics. Were there other shooters? Ryan's face showed genuine struggle. I hear the shots in my memories, and they seem to come from different directions. But I can't be certain. The trauma of the moment, the confusion, it makes the memories fragmented. What I'm more certain of is that afterward, in whatever form of consciousness persists, I was aware of cover-up, of investigation being guided toward a predetermined conclusion. But this awareness isn't the same as memory. It's more like understanding that came later. This admission, that some of what Ryan claimed to know wasn't direct memory, but later understanding, actually increased Dr. Morrison's assessment of his credibility. It suggested a level of self-awareness and honesty about the limitations of his recall that would be unusual in someone fabricating or embellishing. Catherine corroborated that Ryan had always been careful to distinguish between what he felt he truly remembered and what seemed more like impressions or beliefs. By the fall of 2020, word of Ryan's case had spread quietly through academic networks studying consciousness and reincarnation claims. Dr. Morrison was contacted by Dr. Ian Stevenson's successors at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies. They had documented hundreds of cases of children claiming past life memories, some with verifiable details. Ryan's case, if authenticated, would be among the most prominent historical figures claimed. They requested permission to include his case in their ongoing research, maintaining confidentiality about his identity. Catherine agreed, believing that understanding these phenomena might help other families dealing with similar experiences. The research team conducted their own interviews and assessments. They noted that Ryan's memories followed patterns documented in other cases: spontaneous emergence in early childhood, detailed and consistent recall, emotional intensity, and gradual fading as the child matured. They also noted the psychological impact on Ryan. He sometimes struggled with identity questions, feeling caught between being a normal 10-year-old boy and carrying memories of being President of the United States. Catherine had sought counseling for him with a therapist experienced in working with children who reported past life memories. Dr. Morrison compiled his findings into a preliminary report in December 2020. He documented over 70 specific claims Ryan had made that could be verified against historical records. Of these, 63 were accurate, 5 were unverifiable either way, and 2 appeared to be incorrect based on available evidence. The accuracy rate was statistically significant, but not perfect. Dr. Morrison noted that even genuine memory is imperfect and subject to distortion, so complete accuracy would actually be more suspicious than the pattern Ryan demonstrated. The report included testimony from Catherine about Ryan's character and behavior. She described a thoughtful, sometimes melancholic child who seemed burdened by knowledge he couldn't fully process. She talked about nights when he woke from dreams about being in the White House, about missing his children from that life, about feeling that his work was unfinished. These weren't nightmares in the traditional sense, but rather profound experiences of loss and interrupted purpose. She also noted moments of startling maturity when Ryan would comment on political events with insight that seemed beyond his years. One particular incident Catherine shared stayed with Dr. Morrison. In November 2020, on the 57th anniversary of the assassination, Ryan asked to visit Dallas. Catherine was hesitant, but consulted with Dr. Morrison, who believed it might provide important observational data. They traveled to Dallas in January 2021 when pandemic restrictions had eased slightly. Ryan stood in Dealey Plaza on a cold morning, staring up at the 6th-floor window of the former Texas School Book Depository. He walked the motorcade route slowly. When he reached the approximate location where the limousine had been when the shots were fired, he stopped and stood very still for several minutes. Catherine stood back, giving him space. When he finally turned to her, his face was wet with tears. "I forgive whoever did this. I understand that violence comes from fear and pain, but I wish I could have finished what I started. There was so much more to do." This statement, captured on Catherine's phone video, revealed perhaps the most compelling aspect of Ryan's experience. Not the specific details he could recall, but the emotional continuity he seemed to maintain with Kennedy's sense of purpose and unfinished work. Whether this was genuine past life memory, extraordinary empathy, or something else entirely, it represented a profound connection to a historical figure's inner life. As Ryan approached his 11th birthday in early 2021, he reported that his memories were beginning to fade, becoming less vivid and more like regular memories of something he had learned rather than experienced. This pattern was consistent with research on childhood past life recall. Dr. Morrison documented this transition carefully, noting that Ryan's emotional connection remained even as specific details became hazier. Ryan told him in one of their final formal interviews that he was ready to let go, to focus on being a kid, but that he would always carry something of that other life with him. The question of what Ryan's experience means remains open. If consciousness can persist across lifetimes, if memory can transcend death, then perhaps the most powerful man in the world in 1963 found his way back to an ordinary family in Virginia with a story to tell. If instead this represents some other phenomenon, extraordinary access to historical information through unknown means, psychological condition, or simply remarkable coincidence, then it still speaks to the profound mystery of human consciousness and our capacity to connect across time with the experiences of others. Dr. Morrison concluded his research report by noting that certainty was not possible, but that dismissal was not justified. Something remarkable had occurred with this child, something that deserved serious consideration and careful study. Ryan continues to live a normal life as much as possible, though Catherine says he still sometimes gets a distant look in his eyes when he sees photographs from the 1960s or hears certain songs from that era. He talks about wanting to study political science when he's older, about wanting to serve others. Whether he's carrying forward a mission from another life or simply inspired by a profound experience of historical connection, his future remains his own to write. But for those who studied his case, who heard him describe Dallas with the voice of someone who was there, the questions he raised will persist. What really happened in that plaza? And what does it mean if the person who experienced it came back to tell us something we might have missed? If you're fascinated by mysteries of consciousness, cases of past life recall, and investigations into experiences that challenge our understanding of reality, subscribe to this channel. We explore documented cases with intellectual rigor and open-minded curiosity, seeking not easy answers but deeper questions. Join us as we investigate the boundaries of human consciousness and the possibilities that exist beyond our current scientific models. Hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss an investigation that might change how you understand memory, identity, and the persistence of consciousness across time.